A Apple Pie by Kate Greenaway. Read for Librivox.org by Chad Horner. A. Apple pie. B. Bit it. C. Cut it. D. Dealt it. E. Eat it. F. Fought for it. G. Got it. H. Had it. J. Jumped for it. K. Knelt for it. L. Longed for it. M. Mourned for it. N. Nodded for it. O. Opened it. P. Peeped in it. Q. Quartered it. R. Ran for it. S. Sang for it. T. Took it. U, V, W, X, Y, Z all had a large slice and then went off to bed. End of A Apple Pie by Kate Greenaway. Book of Nations for Children by an unknown author. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Read by Chad Horner. The Spaniards live in Spain. They are tall and thin, with dark complexions. The men shave their beards, but leave mustachios on their upper lip. The gentlemen pay great regard to the ladies, and it is common for a gentleman to approach a lady with his knees bended, kissing her hands. The Indians are the people that inhabited this country before the white people came here. They are of a copper colour, with long black hair and small eyes. They wear but little clothing and live in small huts. The Italians live in Italy, one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Italy produces very fine grapes, and many of the people are engaged in tending the vineyards. There are various races of people in South America. Some are Indians, some Negroes, and some Spaniards. In dress, the ladies follow the Spanish fashion. They are fond of ornaments. The Turks live in Turkey. Their complexions are fair, and the women are considered very handsome. They are fond of smoking, and use long pipes. The Turks are solemn, grave, and slow, but easily provoked. The Russians are a strong, hardy people, and very industrious. Their country is cold, and the ground is covered with snow most of the year. The Russians resemble the English in appearance, but the women paint themselves with rouge. The Hindus live in the southern part of Asia. They have dark complexions, and are very ignorant. They are idolaters and worship strange images of every shape and colour. End of Book of Nations for Children by an unknown author. Happy and Gay Marching Away by an unknown author. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Read by Chad Horner. Happy and Gay Marching Away. Introduction. Here are Toot, Tom, and Toby. There are lots of things to see. There are dogs and cats and horses and goats, as happy as they can be. Turn the leaves gently. The dogs and the cats and the little children too will be hurt if you tear them. How would you feel if anyone tore up you? Fly, little bird, away. A little girl read in her book how a wicked boy a wild bird took from out its nest in the greenwood tree, a captive now 'tis forced to be, and flutters its poor wings all day long, and beats the bars of its cage so strong. Poor little bird, she softly cried. Then on her head her hood she tied, took down the cage of her own bird, opened the door with joyous word. Fly, little bird, away, quoth she, back to your home in the greenwood tree. Away, away, the glad bird flew, far out of sight in heaven's blue. The wee girl watched with wondering eye till it had faded in the sky, then sat her down and cried, boo-hoo, my bird is gone, what shall I do? Her pinafore with tears was wet, my bird again I'll never get. At last she raised her weeping eye, and there at hand what should she spy but Birdie hopping in his door, tired of his freedom, back once more. May Day. One day, all in the sweet spring weather, two little folk went out together on the bright May day. Sun was shining, birds were singing, flowers blooming, May bells ringing, oh, the glad May day. So they too went forth a-maying, laughing, dancing, singing, saying, oh, the bright May day. What care we for mother's warning? Who would bide at home this morning? Oh, the glad May day. Hi diddle diddle. Hi diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. The cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the dish ran away with the spoon. Jack and Jill. These are Jack and Jill. Do you not see their pail? They fill it with salt water. What a sweet little lamb, said May. No, it is a wolf. I must run. He will eat me. Doll and I. Oh dear, on dear. 'Tis almost 9. The birds all sing. The sun does shine. Poor Doll and I to school must go. I don't see why we hate it so. I hate those letters. They twist and turn. There's no use trying. I'll never learn. Hurrah! Hurrah! At last it's 2. I am so glad. What shall we do? Come, Doll, let's run. I'll never go. When I get big, to school I know, but every minute of the day I'll spend just as I like in play. The birthday present. Hold it tight, Tom dear, said May. Mamma will be pleased at her birthday gift. I think it is just lovely. But the words were not out of her mouth when Tom caught his foot and fell at full length on the carpet. Crash went the vase that was to have been Mamma's present in 2 bits. May burst into tears, but she stopped all at once when she saw that Tom did not get up and that his face was growing very white. "Oh, Tom," she cried, "is anything the matter?" "My knee," groaned Tom. "It hurts awfully." May ran at once for Papa. He came and Tom was lifted up and put to bed, and the doctor was sent for. It was found that his knee was badly hurt and that he must not get out of bed for a month. Hard work it is for Tom, but May stayed by him all the time, and at the month's end he was well again. Rover passes by. A sacred little couple, fright in each eye. Oh, what is the matter? A dog passes by. Bow wow! I'm sure 'tis a big dog, or Kitty'd not hide, and her brave little mistress so nearly have cried. Bow wow! The sea foam. One bright spring day Tom got out of his new sailboat, the Sea Foam. Dolly went with him, and they set out for the pond. They had but just put the boat in the water when they saw their cousin's Grace. She had a doll in her arms, which she was carrying with great care, and she had her eyes on the ground as she walked along. End of Happy and Gay Marching Away by an unknown author. Denslow's Humpty Dumpty by William Wallace Denslow. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Denslow's Humpty Dumpty by William Wallace Denslow. Read by Chad Horner. Humpty Dumpty was a smooth, round little chap with a winning smile and a great golden heart in his broad breast. Only one thing troubled Humpty, and that was that he might fall and crack his thin white skin. He wished to be hard all the way through, for he felt his heart wobble when he walked or ran about, so off he went to the black hen for advice. This hen was kind and wise, so she was just the one for him to go to with his trouble. "Your father, old Humpty," said the hen, "was very foolish, and would take warning from no one. You know what the poet said of him: Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men cannot put Humpty Dumpty together again. So, you see, he came to a very bad end, just because he was reckless and would not take a hint from anyone. He was much worse than a scrambled egg. The king, his horses and his men did all they could for him, but his case was hopeless." And the hen shook her head sadly. "What you must do," continued the hen, as she wiped a tear from her bright blue eye, "is to go to the farmer's wife next door and tell her to put you into a pot of boiling hot water. Your skin is so hard and smooth it will not hurt you, and when you come out you may do as you wish. Nothing can break you, and you can tumble about to your heart's content, and you will not break, nor even dent yourself." So Humpty rolled in next door and told the farmer's wife that he wanted to be put into boiling hot water, as he was too brittle to be of any use to himself or to anyone else. "Indeed you shall," said the farmer's wife. "What is more, I shall wrap you up in a piece of spotted calico, so that you will have a nice colored dress. You will come out looking as bright as an Easter egg." So she tied him up in a gay new rag, and dropped him into the copper kettle of boiling water that was on the hearth. It was pretty hot for Humpty at first, but he soon got used to it, and was happy, for he felt himself getting harder every minute. He did not have to stay in the water long before he was quite well done, and as hard as a brick all the way through. So, untying the rag, he jumped out of the kettle as tough and as bright as any hard-boiled egg. The calico had marked him from head to foot with big, bright red spots. He was as gaudy as a circus clown, and as nimble and merry as one. The father's wife shook with laughter to see the pranks of the little fellow, for he frolicked and frisked about from table to chair and mantelpiece. He would fall from the shelf to the floor, just to show how hard he was, and after thanking the good woman most politely for the service she had done him, he walked out into the sunshine on the clothesline like a rope dancer, to see the wide, wide world. Of the travels of Humpty Dumpty much could be said. He went east, west, north, and south. He sailed the seas. He walked and rode on the land through all the countries of the earth, and all his life long he was happy and content. Sometimes, as a clown in a circus, he would make fun for old and young; again, as a wandering minstrel, he twangled the strings of his banjo and sung a merry song, and so on through all his travels. He would lighten the cares of others, and make them forget their sorrows, and fill every heart with joy. But wherever he went, in sunshine or in rain, he never forgot to sing the praises of the wise black hen, nor the good kind farmer's wife, who had started him in life hardened against sorrow, with a big heart in the right place for the cheer and comfort of others. End of Denslow's Humpty Dumpty by William Wallace Denslow. Jack and Jill and Old Dame Gill by an unknown author. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Jack and Jill and Old Dame Gill by an unknown author. Read by Chad Horner. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Then up Jack got, and home did trot, as fast as he could caper. Dame Gill did the job to plaster his knob with vinegar and brown paper. Then Jill came in, and she did grin to see Jack's paper plaster. Her mother put her a false cap on for laughing at Jack's disaster. This made Jill pout, and she ran out, and Jack did quickly follow. They rode dog ball. Jill got a fall. How Jack did laugh and hollow. The dame came out to know all about. Jill said Jack made her tumble. Says Jack, I'll tell you how she fell, then judge if she need grumble. Dame Gill did grin as she went in, and Jill was plagued to Jack Will Goat came by and made Jack cry, and knocked him on his back Now Jill did laugh and Jack did cry, but his tears did soon abate. Then Jill did say that they should play at seesaw across the gate. They seesawed high, they seesawed low, at length they both did tumble. We both are down, we both must own, let neither of us grumble. Then the next thing they made a swing, but Jill set up a big cry, for the swing gave way in the midst of the play and threw her into the pigsty. The sow came by, says Jack, I'll try if I can't ride this prancer. He gave a jump on old sow's rump, but she lit him a droll dance, sir. So ran and squalled while Jack he bawled, and Jill joined in the choir. Dog ball being near, bit sow in the ear and threw Jack in the mire. Though Jack was not hurt, he was all over dirt. I wish you had but seen him, and how Jill did jump with him to the bump and bumped on him to clean him. Hearing the rout, Dame Gill came out with a horsewhip from the door. She laid it on Jack and poor Jill's back until they both did roar. Ball held So's ear, and both in rear ran against old Dame and hither, that she did fall over So and Ball, how Jack and Jill did twitter. And now all three went in to see, to put the place to right all, which done they sup, then drink a cup, and with you a good night all. End of Jack and Jill and Old Dame Gill by an unknown author.
Jimmieboy's Valentine by John Kendrick Bangs. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings can be found in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Jimmieboy's Valentine. Jimmieboy had been watching for the postman all day, and he was getting just a little tired of it. It was Valentine's Day, and he was very naturally expecting that some of his many friends would remember that fact and send him a valentine. Still, the postman, strange to say, didn't come. "He'll be later than usual," said Jimmieboy's mamma. "The postman is always late on Valentine's Day. He has so many valentines to leave at people's houses." "Well, I wish he'd hurry," said Jimmieboy, "because I want to see what my valentines look like." Jimmieboy always called valentines valentines, so nobody paid any attention to that mistake. And then the front door bell rang. "I guess, maybe, perhaps, that's the postman, though I didn't hear his whistle," said Jimmieboy, rushing to the head of the stairs and listening intently. But no one went to the door, and Jimmieboy became so impatient that he fairly tumbled down the stairs to open it himself. "How-de-do," he said, as he opened the door, and then he stopped short in amazement. There was no one there, and yet his solution was returned. "How-de-do," something said. "I'm glad you came to the door, because I mightn't have got in if the maid had opened it. People who don't understand queer things don't understand me, and I rather think if the girl had opened that door and had been spoken to by something she couldn't see, she'd have started to run and hide, shrieking 'Look!' meanwhile." "I've half a mind to shriek 'Look!' myself," said Jimmieboy, a little fearfully, for he wasn't quite easy about this invisible somewhat he was talking to. "Who are you, anyhow?" "I'm not a who, I'm a what," said the queer thing. "I'm not a person, I'm a thing. Just a plain, homely, queer thing. I couldn't hurt a fly, so there's no reason why you should cry 'Look!'" "Well, what kind of queer thing are you?" asked Jimmieboy. "Are you the kind of queer thing I can invite into the house, or would it be better for me to shut the door and make you stay outside?" "I don't like to say," said the queer thing, with a pathetic little sigh. "I think I'm very nice, and that anybody ought to be glad to have me in the house, but that's only my opinion of myself. Somebody else might think very differently. In fact, somebody else has thought differently. You know rhinoceroses and crocodiles think themselves very handsome, and that's why they sit and gaze at themselves in the water all the time. Everybody else, though, knows that they are very ugly. Now that's the way with me. As I have said, I'm sure in my own mind that I am perfectly splendid, and yet your Uncle Periwinkle, who thought of me, wouldn't write and send me to you." "You must be very wise, if you know what you mean," said Jimmieboy. "I don't." "Oh, no, I'm not so wise. I'm only splendid, that's all," said the other. "You see, I'm a valentine, only I was never made. I was only thought of. Your Uncle Periwinkle thought of me, and he was going to send me to you, and then he changed his mind and thought you'd rather have a box of candy. So he didn't write me and sent you a box of chocolate creams instead. The postman's got 'em, and if he doesn't find out what they are and eat 'em all up, you'll receive them this afternoon. Won't you let me come in and tell me about myself and see if you don't like me? I want to be liked, oh, ever so much, and I was awfully disappointed when your uncle decided not to send me. I cried for 8 minutes and then resolved to come here myself and see if after all he wasn't wrong. Let me come in, and if you don't like me I'll go right out again and never come back." "I like you already, without knowing what kind of valentine you are," said Jimmieboy kindly. "Of course you can come in, and you can stay as long as you want to. I don't believe you'll be in anybody's way." "Thank you very much," said the valentine gratefully, as it moved into the house, and, to judge from where its voice next came, settled down on the big sofa cushion. I'd hoped you'd say that. What kind of Valentine are you? Asked Jimmieboy in a moment. Are you a funny one or a solemn one, with paper frills all over it in a box and a little Cupid peeping out from behind a tree? I am almost afraid to tell you, said the Valentine timidly. I am so afraid you won't like me. Oh, yes, I will, said Jimmieboy hastily. I like all kinds of Valentines. Well, that's a relief, said the other. I'm comic. Hooray! cried Jimmieboy. I just love comic Valentines, with red and blue pictures in 'em and funny verses. Do you really? Returned the Valentine cheerfully. Then I can say hooray too, because that's what I was to be. I was to be a picture of a boy with red trousers on, sitting crosswise on a great yellow broomstick, galloping through a blue sky toward a pink moon. How do you like that? It is splendid, just as you said, returned Jimmieboy with a broad smile. Those are my favorite colors. You like those colors better than you do chocolate cream color? Asked the Valentine. Oh, my, yes, said Jimmieboy. Probably you wouldn't want to be so good to eat as a chocolate cream, but for a Valentine you're much better. I don't want to eat Valentines. I want to keep 'em. You don't know how glad you make me, said the pathetic little Valentine, its voice trembling with happiness. Now if you like my verses as well as you do my picture, I will be perfectly content. I guess I'll like 'em, said Jimmieboy. Can you recite yourself to me? I'm not written, didn't I tell you? Returned the Valentine. That's the good part of it. I can tell you what I might have been, and you can take your choice. That's good, said Jimmieboy. Then I'm sure to be satisfied. Just so, said the Valentine. Now let me think what I might have been. Well, what do you think of this? If I'd had a cat with a bright red tail, and a parrot whose voice was soft and low, I'd put him away in a water pail, and send him to where the glowworms glow. And then I would sit on an old whisk broom, and sail through the great soft starlit sky, to where bright moonbeams gaily frume their songs to the parboiled Gemini. And I'd say to the fruming moonbeams that I'd come from the home of the sweet woodbine, deserting my parrot and red-tailed cat to ask if they'd be my Valentine. I guess that's good, said Jimmieboy. Only I don't know what fruming is. Neither do I, said the Valentine. But that needn't make any difference. You see, it's a nonsense rhyme anyhow, and I couldn't remember any word that rhymed with broom. Frume isn't a bad word, and insomuch as it's new to us, we can make it mean anything we want to. That's true, said Jimmieboy. But why do you send the cat and the parrot off? They aren't in the picture, said the Valentine, and so of course we have to get rid of them before we have the boy start off on the broomstick. It would be very awkward to go sailing off through the sky on a broomstick with the parrot and cat in tow. Then, to show the moonbeams how much the boy thinks of them, you have to have him leave something behind that he thinks a great deal of, and that something might just as well be a parrot and a cat as anything else. And what does it all mean? Asked Jimmieboy. Is the boy supposed to be me? No, explained the Valentine. The boy is supposed to be Uncle Periwinkle, and you are the moonbeams. In putting the poem the way I've told you is just another nonsense way of saying that he'll be your Valentine and will take a great deal of trouble and make sacrifices to do it if necessary. I see, said Jimmieboy, and I think it's very nice indeed, though I might like some other verse better. Of course you might, said the Valentine. That's the way with everything. No matter how fine a thing may be, there may be something else that might be better, and the thing to do it is to look about and try to find the thing that's better. How's this? The broom went round to Jimmieboy's and cried, Oh, Jimmieboy B, come forth in the night, desert your toys, and take a fine ride with me. I'll take you off through the starlit sky, we'll visit the moon so fine, if you will come with my alacrity and be my Valentine. That isn't so bad either, said Jimmieboy. I sort of wish a broomstick would come after me that way and take me sailing off to the moon. I'd be its Valentine in a minute if it would do that. I'd like to take a trip through all the stars and see why they twinkle and— Why they twinkle? Interrupted the Valentine. Why they twinkle? Ha! Why, I can tell you that, for as a secret just between you and me, I know a broomstick that has been up to the stars and told me all about them. The stars twinkle because from where they are so high up, and they can see all that is going on in the world. And they see so many amusing things that it keeps them laughing all the time, and they have to twinkle just as your eyes do when they see anything funny. "That's it, is it?" said Jimmieboy. "Yes, sir," said the Valentine, "and it's fine, too, to watch 'em when you are feeling sad. You know how it is when you're feeling sort of unhappy, and somebody comes right along who feels just the other way, who laughs and sings how you get to feel better by yourself right off. Well, remember the stars when you don't feel good, how they're always twinkling. Watch 'em, and by you'll begin to twinkle yourself. You can't help it. And further, Jimmieboy," added this altogether strange Valentine, "when anybody tries to make you think that this world has got more bad things than good things in it, look at the stars again. They wouldn't twinkle if that was so. Until the stars stop twinkling and begin to frown, I don't think you'll ever think badly of the world." "I won't," said Jimmieboy. "I always did like the world. As long as I've been in it I've thought it was a pretty fine place." "It is," said the Valentine. "Nobody can spoil it either, unless you do it yourself. But I say, if you'd like to have me, I'll introduce you to my broomstick friend sometime, and maybe some day he'll give you that ride." "Will you?" cried Jimmieboy with delight. "That will be fine. You are the dearest old Valentine that ever was." Saying which, forgetting in his happiness that the Valentine was not to be seen, and so could not be touched, Jimmieboy leaned over to hug him affectionately as he sat on the sofa cushion. Which may account for the fact that when Jimmieboy's papa came home he found Jimmieboy clasping the sofa cushion in his arms, asleep and unconscious of the fact that the postman had come and gone, leaving behind him 6 comic Valentines, 4 solemn ones, and a package of chocolate creams from Uncle Periwinkle. When he waked he was rejoiced to find them, but he has often told me since that the finest Valentine he ever got was the one Uncle Periwinkle thought he wouldn't like as well as the candy, and I believe he still has hopes that the invisible Valentine may turn up again some day, bringing with him his friend the broomstick, who will still take Jimmieboy off for a visit to the twinkling stars. End of Jimmieboy's Valentine by John Kendrick Bangs. Read by Anna Pinto.
Little Playfellows, Sugar Plum Series by Anonymous. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Chad Horner from Ballyclare in County Antrim, Northern Ireland, situated in the north-east of the island of Ireland. Little Playfellows, Sugar Plum Series by Anonymous. The Little Cavalier. A little boy was playing with his hobby horse one day, and making a great deal of noise, when an old gentleman who lived in the next room called to him and said, "Can you not play more quietly?" The little boy answered, "It is raining and I can't go out of doors." The old gentleman said, "But can you not make less noise? For I am sick and need rest." The little boy said, "If that is the case, I will not make any noise." When his mother came home, she praised him for his kindness, and said he did right. Little Johnny, for that was his name, had forgotten all about the old gentleman, when a week after a large box came to him on which was written, "To my young neighbour, a souvenir of a rainy day." The box was full of beautiful lead soldiers and cannons, with which he had a great deal of pleasure. When his mother saw them, she said, "You see, my son, kindness always receives its reward." The Little Savoyard. There was once a little boy who came from Savoy to the city of Paris with a fellow countryman. Soon after arriving, his countryman deserted him, though he had promised his brother to take care of him. Little Pierre did not know what to do all alone in this great city. He walked around all day crying bitterly, but when evening came he thought of a prayer his mother had taught him, and he repeated it. "My God, you who watch over the little birds, oh, do not forsake the little children." As he ended the prayer, the pigeons of the city, which were very numerous, flew about him, and one lit on his shoulder. He said to it, "Beautiful bird, go and tell my mother to come and get me." A lady passing by heard him repeat the prayer and give the message to the bird. She knew at once that he was a good boy, so she took him to her home, where she gave him nice clothes and plenty to eat. She sent a letter to his mother, and while waiting for her to come to him, he used to go out and play with the pigeons. They would run to be caressed by him, for they well knew that they could trust the child who prays. The Goat and her Kid. Goats are not naturally vicious, but will defend themselves if attacked. There was once a little boy in New York named Harry, who went to visit his aunt in the country. This aunt had a goat named Grisette, who had a little kid, and she told Harry that he could feed Grisette, but he must not tease her. But Harry was very mischievous, and liked to see the goat run on the hillsides. To make her run, he would poke her with a stick. When one day he stuck the stick in her nose, which was more than Grisette could stand, so she put down her head, butted him with her horns, and down he rolled to the bottom of the hill. Harry was much bruised and had to be carried into the house and put to bed, where he was confined for 6 weeks, thus losing most of his holiday. Let this be a lesson to you, my little friends. Never torment any animals. The dog of the regiment. This dog is named Pompey. He is called the dog of the regiment because he has been with the regiment of soldiers for many years. He is a wonderful dog. He can march on his hind legs, play the drum with his paws, and pretend to be dead. Pompey has been very useful to his regiment. Once he carried a dispatch through a fire of musketry. Another time he woke up a sleeping sentinel, and again he pointed out a troop of the enemy hidden in the woods. Finally he saved the life of the surgeon of the regiment, who had been left to die on the field of battle. Pompey is a friend to all the soldiers, from the colonel down. You will see him in the picture pretending to be a bear, that he may get a piece of sugar which the colonel's son is offering him. The little mariners. George and his sister Lily are having a nice time sailing their little boat in the brook. Their mother told them they could play here, for the water was not deep. She also told them a story about their friend Emile, who could not swim, although his father was a fisherman. Emile thought the water was not deep enough, so he went to the river with his boat. In leaning over the bank to push it into the current, he lost his balance and fell into the water. He would have been drowned had not his father, who was fishing near, came to his rescue. There is no fear for George and Lily, for they will not disobey their mamma, and no danger will come to them. Poor Gustave. Little boys and girls often think their parents are severe because they reprimand them for their faults, but they always know what is best for them. There was once a little boy named Gustave, who had but one eye. Gustave was naturally sweet and affectionate, but he was fond of teasing, and this fault caused him to lose his eye. I will tell you how it happened. One day he went to call on his cousin Frank. He found him in his garden, trying to catch a beautiful butterfly for his collection of insects. Gustave slipped up behind him slyly, which made the butterfly fly off. Frank turned suddenly and knocked Gustave over. He fell on a large rosebush, one of the thorns of which penetrated his left eye, destroying the sight forever. You see that little causes often produce great effects. If Gustave had not been fond of teasing, he would not have lost his eye. End of Little Playfellows Sugar Plum series by Anonymous. This recording is in the public domain.
Lizzie Lindsay by Mary McGregor. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Lizzie Lindsay. In the fair city of Edinburgh there lived many, many years ago a beautiful maiden named Lizzie Lindsay. Her home was in the Canongate, which is now one of the poorest parts of the city. But in the days when Lizzie danced and sang and made her father's and mother's heart rejoice, the Canongate was the home of all the richest lords and ladies. For close to the Canongate was Holyrood, the palace where the king held his court, and it was well thought the lord and ladies of long ago to live near the palace, where there were many gay sights to be seen. Lizzie had been a bonny wee girl, and as she grew up she grew bonnier still, until, not only in Edinburgh, but far and wide throughout the country, people would speak of her beauty. Even the folk who dwelt away over the hills and the highlands heard of the beauty of Lizzie Lindsay. Dame Lindsay loved her daughter well and gave her beautiful gowns of silk and velvet. Her father, too, would bring her home many a sparkling jewel, many a brilliant gem. It seemed as though Lizzie Lindsay had all that her heart could wish. Certainly she did not wish to leave her home in the Canongate, for though lord after lord, noble after noble begged for her hand, Lizzie but tossed her beautiful head high in the air as she said them nay. But though it was well known that the lovely maiden had kind looks and gentle words to spare for none, save only her dear father and her doting mother, yet still the lords and nobles would dance more gladly with Lizzie than with any other maiden. And a ball, even a ball given by the court at the palace of Holyrood, seemed to be less gladsome were it known that the fair maiden would not be there. Now, as I have told you, the fame of Lizzie Lindsay's beauty had spread even to the Highlands, and Donald, the young laird of Kincossy, heard that she was fairer than any other maiden in the land, and that she was haughtier and more wilful as well, for she would have naught to say to any of the rich suitors who surrounded her. Then Donald, who was tall and handsome, and who was used to have his own way, smiled as he heard of Lizzie's wilful spirit and her great beauty. He made up his mind that he would go to Edinburgh and try to win as his bride the bonny lassie who would have naught to do with noble or with lord. The young laird lived with his father and mother in a castle built high amid the heather-covered hills, and little until now had Donald cared for city ways or city walls. To hunt the deer, to chase the roe, to spend the long hours from early morn until even among the heathery moors which were all his own, had been happiness enough for him. But now the glory faded from the heather, and the hunt and chase lost their delight. Sir Donald's heart was in the fair city of Edinburgh with beautiful Lizzie Lindsay, whom, though he had not seen, he loved. At length one day the young laird went to his lady mother, and, kissing her hand right courteously, he begged her to grant him a boon. For Donald had been well trained, and, though he was no longer a boy, he did not dream of leaving his home among the hills until he had gained his mother's consent. "Grant me a boon, lady mother," said the young laird. "Send me away to the fair city of Edinburgh, for it is there that my true love dwells. And if ye will do this, I will bring you home a daughter more beautiful than any other maiden in the land." Now the young laird's mother had heard of Lizzie Lindsay, and it may be that she was glad that her son should wish to bring to the castle so beautiful a bride. Yet she had no wish for the maiden to be won by aught save by love for her dear son alone. Lizzie had refused to wed with lord or noble, it was true, yet the broad lands, the ancient castle of the Macdonalds, might please her fancy. But the lady of Kincossy determined that neither for land nor for castle should bonny Lizzie Lindsay come to the Highlands. When she saw young Donald at her side, and heard him begging leave to go to the fair city of Edinburgh, she smiled as she looked into his eager face, and answered slowly, "My son, ye shall go to Edinburgh, an it please you, and so ye are able, ye shall bring back with you Lizzie Lindsay as your bride. A fairer maiden, I can well believe, has never graced these walls. Yet if ye go, it shall not be as Sir Donald MacDonald, the heir to broad lands and ancient castles, but as a simple stranger, without riches and without rank. Then, if ye do win your bride, it will be through love alone," said his mother gravely. But her eyes shone bright and glad, for she thought that there was not a maiden in all the land who would not be proud to wed her son, though he had neither riches nor lands. As for the old laird, he laughed when he heard why his son had grown weary at the hunt and listless at the chase. He laughed and cried, "Let the lad go to the city. Before a year has passed away he will be home again, and the beautiful Lizzie Lindsay with him." For his old father, too, thought that no maiden could refuse to love his bonny, self-willed son. Well, young Donald was too anxious to be off and away to Edinburgh to be grieved to go as a simple Highlander. Before the day was over he had said farewell to his light-hearted old father and to his gentle lady mother, and clad in a rough tartan kilt, and without a servant to follow him, the young laird was off to the fair city of Edinburgh. When Donald reached Edinburgh, he wondered how he would see the maiden of whose beauty and of whose cleverness he had so often heard. He had not long to wait, for he had scarce been a day in the city when he heard that a great ball was to be given, and to be graced by the presence of the fair maiden whom he hoped to win as his bride. Donald made up his mind that he too would go to the ball, and it was easy for him to do this, as there were many in the city who knew the young laird. When he entered the ballroom, he saw that the lords and nobles were dressed in suits of velvet or silk and satins, while he wore only his kilt of rough tartan. The lords and ladies, too, stared at the tall, handsome young Highlander in his strange garments, and some, who did not know him, forgot their good manners, and smiled and nudged each other as he passed down the room. But the young laird had no thought to spare for the crowd. He was making his way to the circle, in the midst of which stood Lizzie Lindsay. He had heard too often of the beautiful maiden not to be sure it was she as soon as his eyes fell upon her face. Young Donald, in his homespun tartan, stood on the outskirt of the little crowd that surrounded her, listening. The lords in their gay suits were doing their utmost to win the goodwill of the maiden. but their flattery and foolish words seemed to give her little pleasure. Indeed, she was too used to them to find them aught but a weariness. Soon Donald was bowing before the maiden he had left his home to win, and begging her to dance with him. And something in the bright eyes and gallant bearing of young Donald pleased the petted maiden, and, despite his rough suit, she had naught but smiles for the young stranger from the Highlands. The lords, in their silks and velvets, opened their eyes wide in astonishment as Lizzie glided past them with young Donald. The ladies smiled and flouted her, but the maiden paid no heed to their words or looks. Donald was not flattering her as she was used to be flattered. He was telling her of the country in which he dwelt. And Lizzie, as she listened, heard the hum of the bees, smelt the fragrance of the heather. Nay, she even forgot the ballroom, and she was out on the silent moorland, or climbing the steep mountains side by side with the young stranger whose face was so eager, whose eyes were so bright. She was stooping to pluck the wild flowers that grew in the nooks of some sheltered glen, or she was kilting her dainty gown and crossing the mountain streamlets, and ever the tall young stranger was by her side. Before the ball was over, Donald knew that Lizzie Lindsay's home was in the Canongate, and he had begged to be allowed to see her there. Lizzie had no wish to lose sight of the bright young Highlander, and she told him gaily that if he came to the Canongate to see her, he should be welcome, both to her and her dear father and mother. When the dance ended, the young laird went to his lodgings, and his heart was light and his dreams glad. His old father had thought he might be in Edinburgh a year ere he won his bride, but young Donald murmured to himself that it would scarce be 12 long months before he was back again to the Highlands with his bonny Lizzie Lindsay. The next day Donald was at the Canongate betimes, and Lizzie welcomed him merrily, and her father and mother looked in kindly fashion at the young stranger, for indeed Donald had the gift of winning hearts. But neither father nor mother dreamed that the country-clad youth would win their beautiful daughter's hand, for had she not refused it to many a lordly earl and noble knight? Yet the more Lizzie heard about the Highlands, the more she longed to be there with young Donald by her side. At length the day came when Donald, with little fear and much hope in his heart, asked the maiden if she would go with him to the Highlands. "We will feed on curds and whey," cried the daring young Donald. "Your cheeks will grow more pink, and your brow more white with our simple fare. Your bed shall be made on the fresh green bracken, and my plaid shall wrap you round. Will ye come to the Highlands with me, Lizzie Lindsay?" Now Lizzie had listened to young Donald's words with joy, but also with some fear. Her food had been of the daintiest, her bed of the softest down, and the young stranger, who was indeed scarce a stranger now, had, it seemed, but little to offer her save his love. Yet Lizzie still wished to go to the Highlands. But when Dame Lindsay heard what young Donald had said, she hardened her heart against the bonny young Highlander. "Ye shall speak no more to my daughter," she cried, "until ye have told me where your home is, and how many broadlands are your own." For it seemed to the old dame that a penniless lad would never dare to win her daughter when lords and nobles had wooed her in vain. But Donald's head was high, and he seemed to feel no shame as he answered the old dame bravely. "My name is Donald MacDonald, and I hold it high in honour. My father is an old shepherd, and my mother a dairymaid. Yet kind and gentle will they be to your beautiful daughter if she will come with me to the Highlands." Dame Lindsay could scarce believe she had heard aright. Her daughter marry a shepherd lad? Nay, that should never be, though indeed the lad was a bonny one and brave. Then in her anger she bade young Donald begone. "If ye do steal away my daughter, then, without doubt, ye shall hang for it," she cried. The young laird turned haughtily on his heel. He had little patience, nor could his spirit easily brook such scorn as the old dame flung at him. He turned on his heel and he said, "There is no law in Edinburgh city this day which can hang me." But before he could say more, Lizzie was by his side. "Come to my room, Donald," she pleaded, and as he looked at the beautiful girl, the young laird's wrath vanished as quickly as it had come. "Come to my room for an hour until I draw a fair picture of you to hang in my bower. Ye shall have 10 guineas if you will but come." "Your golden guineas I will not have," cried Donald quickly. "I have plenty of cows in the Highlands, and they are all my own. Come with me, Lizzie, and we will feed on curds and whey, and thou shalt have a bonny blue plaid with red and green strips. Come with me, Lizzie Lindsay, we will herd the wee lambs together." Yet, though Lizzie loved young Donald MacDonald, she still hesitated to leave her kind parents and her beautiful home. She sat in her bower, and she said to her maid, "Helen, what shall I do? For my heart is in the Highlands with Donald." Then the maid, who was well nigh as beautiful as her mistress, cried, "Though I were a princess and sat upon a throne, yet would I leave all to go with young Donald MacDonald." "Oh, Helen," cried Lizzie, "would ye leave your chests full of jewels and silk gowns, and would ye leave your father and mother and all your friends to go away with a Highland laddie who wears naught but a homespun kilt?" But before her maid could answer her, Lizzie had sprung from her chair, saying, "Yet I think he must be a wizard, and have enchanted me, for, come good or come ill, I must e'en go to the Highlands." Then early one morning Lizzie tied up her silk robes in a bundle, and clad herself in one of Helen's plain gowns. With her bundle over her arm, Lizzie Lindsay was off to the Highlands with Donald MacDonald. Donald's heart was glad as he left the fair city of Edinburgh behind him, Lizzie by his side. He had so much to tell his beautiful bride, so much, too, to show her, that at first the road seemed neither rough nor long. But as the hours passed, the way grew rougher, the hills steeper, and Lizzie's strength began to fail. Her shoes, too, which were not made for such rough journeys, were soon so worn that her feet grew hot and blistered. "Alas," sighed Lizzie Lindsay, "I would I were back in Edinburgh, sitting alone in my bower." "We are but a few miles away from the city," said Donald. "Will you even now go back?" But the tears trickled slowly down the maiden's cheeks, and she sobbed, "Now would I receive no welcome from my father, no kiss from my mother, for sore displeased will they be that I have left them for you, Donald MacDonald." On and on they trudged in silence, and as evening crept on Donald cried aloud, "Dry your tears now, Lizzie, for there before us is our home," and he pointed to a tiny cottage on the side of the hill. An old woman stood at the door, gazing down at the hill, and as they drew near she came forward with outstretched hands. "Welcome, Sir Donald," she said, "welcome home to your own." She spoke in Gaelic as Highlanders do, so Lizzie did not know what she said. Sir Donald whispered quickly in the same language, "Hush, call me only Donald, and pretend that I am your son." The old woman, though sore dismayed at having to treat the young laird in so homely a way, promised to do his bidding. Then Donald turned to Lizzie. "Here, mother," he said, "is my lady love, whom I have won in the fair city of Edinburgh." The old woman drew Lizzie into the cottage and spoke kindly to her, but the maiden's heart sank, for a peat fire smouldered and on the hearth, and the room was filled with smoke. There was no easy chair, no couch on which to rest her weary body, so Lizzie dropped down on to a heap of green turf. Her sadness did not seem to trouble Donald. He seemed gayer, happier, every moment. "We are hungry, mother," he said. "Make us a good supper of curds and whey, and then make us a bed of green rushes, and cover us with yonder grey plaids." The old woman moved about eagerly, as though overjoyed to do all that she could for her son and his young bride. Curds and whey was a supper dainty enough for a queen, as Lizzie whispered to her shepherd lad with a little sigh. Even the bed of green rushes could not keep her awake. No sooner had she lain down than, worn out with her long journey, she fell fast asleep, nor did she awake until the sun was high in the sky. As she awoke she heard Donald's voice. He was reproaching her, and she had not been used to reproach. "It would have been well," said Donald, "that you had risen an hour ago to milk the cows, to tend the flock." The tears gathered in Lizzie's eyes and trickled down her cheeks. "Alas, alas," she sighed, "I would I had never left my home, for here I am of little use. I have never milked a cow, nor do I know how to begin, and flocks have I never tended. Alas that I ever came to the Highlands. Yet well do I love Donald MacDonald, and long and dull would the days have been had he left me behind him in Edinburgh." "Shed no more tears, Lizzie," said Donald gently. "Get up and dress yourself in your silk gown, for to-day I will take you over the hills of Kincausey, and show you the glens and dales where I used to play when I was but a little lad." Then Lizzie dried her tears, and soon she was up and dressed in her finest gown, and leaning on Donald's arm, she wandered with him over the heathery hills until they reached a noble castle. Joyously then laughed the young laird as he bade Lizzie gaze all around her and be glad. "I am the lord of all you see, Lizzie," cried he, "for this castle is my home, and the mountains are my own broadlands." Then joyously too laughed Lizzie Lindsay, for she knew that her shepherd lad was none other than the far famed Sir Donald MacDonald. At that moment the castle gates were flung wide, and the old laird of Kincausey came out to greet the bride. "Ye are welcome, Lizzie Lindsay, welcome to our castle," he said right courteously. "Many were the lords and nobles who begged for your hand, but it is young Donald, my son, who has won it, and with no gift save the glance of his bonny blue eyes." And the old laird laughed merrily as he looked up at his son. The laird's gracious mother, too, came down to greet her, and well was she pleased that her boy had won the beautiful maiden he loved. As for Lizzie Lindsay, she sent to Edinburgh to fetch her father and mother, that they might see for themselves how wise their daughter had been to follow Donald MacDonald to the Highlands. End of Lizzie Lindsay by Mary McGregor. Read by BettyB.
Rags, The Story of a Dog by Karen Neiman. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. The car stopped, and a shaggy little dog named Rags was pushed into the street. Rags' owner was very angry. "That's the last slipper of mine, you old chew-up," he said, and sped away. Rags stood in the street. So that was it, he thought. But he had had so many slippers in his closet. How was I to know he'd mind if I just chewed a few? The street was wide and empty, and Rags was frightened. What was a small dog to do? What could he do? Of course, he must find another home. Suddenly Rags grew up. He would never again chew a slipper. Up on the sidewalk he scrambled, ready for adventure. He didn't feel sad at all now. Surely, he thought, I can soon find a nice home. He walked down the sidewalk looking at every house. In front of one was a lady watering her flowers. Rags walked up to her politely. "Woof, woof," he said, and wagged his tail. The lady turned. "Oh, you dirty, ragged creature," she cried. "Get off my lawn!" And with that, she turned the water upon him. Rags ran. He didn't want a home in that lady's house, or in her neighborhood. Cold and wet and frightened, he ran along the street. He was too tired to run any more when he saw a man rocking on the porch of a very pretty house. Perhaps this man would give him a home. Rags stood still. Did he dare go up and ask him? Timidly he crept up, stood very still, and wagged his tail. The man looked over his glasses and said, "Well, well." Rags looked up at him and said, "Woof," which meant, in dog language, "I need a home." Rags didn't see the cat on the arm of the man's chair. He didn't know she was there until, arching her back, she sprang forward and landed on his face. "Rawr!" she screeched. Her claws were sharp. She was telling him, "This is my home. Go away." Rags ran. "Yip, yip, 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 yip," he cried. He ran and he ran. The houses were smaller now and not so close together. He saw some boxes on a vacant lot. He went over, crawled into one, and went to sleep. The boxes belonged to a little boy named Gary. He was building a playhouse with him, and as soon as he had carried in the wood and swept the walks, he would call, "Grandma, everything's done. May I play in my box house now?" "Yes, dear," said Grandma. So Gary hurried to the vacant lot. He was proud of his box house. For days he had worked, dragging the boxes to this grassy spot and nailing them together. Carefully he crawled inside. There in the corner lay Rags, fast asleep. "Why, you poor little dog," cried Gary. Rags woke up. He said, "Woof, woof." Gary understood him. "You want to stay with me, don't you?" he asked. "Woof, woof, woof," Rags answered. And Gary knew that he meant, "Yes, yes, yes." Gary gathered him in his arms. "You're so ragged and dirty," he said, "I'm going to name you Rags." And Rags said, "Woof," which meant, "All right." "Grandma," Gary shouted as he ran toward the kitchen. "Rags has come to live with us." When Grandma saw Rags, she dropped the potato that she was peeling. It rolled across the floor. "Good gracious, Gary, where did you find him?" "In my playhouse." "Well, I don't believe that I ever saw a dirtier, more ragged dog in my life." "But isn't he dear?" Gary pleaded. "Look, he's wagging his tail at you." Indeed, Rags did wag his tail. He wagged and he wagged. Then he had a bright idea. He scooted across the floor, picked up the potato, and carried it to Grandma. "See," Gary cried, "Rags will be a helper." Rags stood still. His brown eyes looked hopefully into Grandma's face. She hated to turn him out, yet she could scarcely manage their own meals, and felt that she could never feed a stray dog. She looked down at Rags. "Well, we'll keep him until tomorrow," she said. "Then we will hunt a home for him." Rags was happy. Grandma gave him some milk. He said "woof woof" for thank you, and lapped it up hungrily. Then he played with Gary, and took another nap. Night came. Grandma put an old pillow on the kitchen floor. It was warm by the stove, and Rags was happy. He curled up and went to sleep. Grandma and Gary went to sleep too. Suddenly, Rags woke up. Sniff, sniff. What was that queer smell? Crackle, crackle, crackle. There was a red light on the wall near the chimney. Something was wrong. Rags stood up. He didn't want anything to happen to this home. "Woof! Woof!" Grandma jumped up and ran to the kitchen. "Oh, the house is on fire!" she screamed. Snatching the broom, she beat at the flames, but she could not put them out. She was wide awake now. Quickly, she filled her dishpan with water and threw it on the wall. 5 dishpans of water, and the fire was out. Grandma stooped and picked up the shaggy little dog. "You saved our home," she crooned softly, "and you can stay with us always." Rags licked her hands. Grandma didn't go back to bed. She sat by the kitchen window with Rags in her lap. It was almost morning. Grandma watched the clouds turn pink and golden over the dark hills. She was very thankful. Rags had saved their home. After a while, Gary woke up, and so did Rags. Grandma told Gary what had happened. "So we'll keep him," she said, "but I don't know how we will manage to feed him." Gary had an idea. "Come, Rags," he said. Rags scampered down the street beside him. They went to the meat market, where the butcher was just opening his doors. "I want a job," said Gary. "Is there some way I can earn meat for my dog?" The butcher looked into Gary's earnest face and down at the little raggedy dog. "I think so. I need someone to sweep out the store every morning." Gary set to work, and the store was soon clean. Then the butcher wrapped up some meat and handed it to Gary. "Here's a dime besides. You did a fine job." "Oh, thanks," gasped Gary. He ran down the street with Rags at his heels. They burst into the kitchen. "Grandma, I've got a job, and here's meat for Rags, and 10 cents, and I can do it every day." Rags was nosing happily about his new home, around the chairs and under the curtains. In the bedroom were 2 blue slippers. He picked them up carefully and carried them to the kitchen and laid them at Grandma's feet. Rags had grown up. Rags would never choose slippers anymore. End of Rags, the Story of a Dog by Karen Neiman. Read by Tom Hirsch.
The Story of Miss Moppet by Beatrix Porter. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Read by Chad Horner. The Story of Miss Moppet by Beatrix Porter. This is a pussy called Miss Moppet. She thinks she has heard a mouse. This is the mouse peeping out behind the cupboard and making fun of Miss Moppet. He is not afraid of a kitten. This is Miss Moppet jumping just too late. She misses the mouse and hits her own head. She thinks it is a very hard cupboard. The mouse watches Miss Moppet from the top of the cupboard. Miss Moppet ties up her head in a duster and sits before the fire. The mouse thinks she is looking very ill. He comes sliding down the bell pull. Miss Moppet looks worse and worse. The mouse comes a little nearer. Miss Moppet holds her poor head in her paws and looks at him through a hole in the duster. The mouse comes very close, and then all of a sudden Miss Moppet jumps upon the mouse. And because the mouse has teased Miss Moppet thinks she will tease the mouse, which is not at all nice of Miss Moppet. She ties him up in the duster and tosses it about like a ball. But she forgot about that hole in the duster, and when she untied it, there was no mouse. He had wriggled out and run away, and he is dancing a jig on the top of the cupboard. End of The Story of Miss Moppet by Beatrix Porter. The Magic Fishbone, a holiday romance, from the pen of Miss Alice Rainbird, age 7, by Charles Dickens. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Read by Chad Horner. Foreword. The story contained herein was written by Charles Dickens in 1867. It is the second of 4 stories entitled Holiday Romance, and was published originally in a children's magazine in America. It purports to be written by a child aged 7. It was republished in England in All the Year Round in 1868. For this and 4 other Christmas pieces, Dickens received £1,000. Holiday Romance was published in book form by Messrs. Chapman and Hall in 1874, with Edwin Drood and other stories. For this reprint, the text of the story as it appeared in All the Year Round has been followed. There was once a king, and he had a queen, and he was the manliest of his sex, and she was the loveliest of hers. The king was, in his private profession, under government. The queen's father had been a medical man out of town. They had 19 children and were always having more. 17 of these children today took care of the baby, and Alicia, the eldest, took care of them all. Their ages varied from 7 years to 7 months. Let us now resume our story. One day the king was going to the office, when he stopped by at the fishmonger's to buy 1.5 pounds of salmon, not too near the tail, which the queen, who was a careful housekeeper, had requested him to send home. Mr. Pickles, the fishmonger, said, "Certainly, sir. Is there any other article? Good morning." The king went on towards the office in a melancholy mood, for quarter day was such a long way off, and several of the dear children were going out of their clothes. He had not proceeded far when Mr. Pickles' errand boy came running after him and said, "Sir, you didn't notice the old lady in our shop." "What old lady?" inquired the king. "I saw none." Now the king had not seen any old lady, because this old lady had been invisible to him, though visible to Mr. Pickles' boy, probably because he messed and splashed the water about to that degree, and flopped the pairs of soles down in that violent manner, that if she had not been visible to him he would have spoilt her clothes. Just then the old lady came trotting up. She was dressed in shot silk of the richest quality, smelling of dried lavender. "King Watkins the first, I believe," said the old lady. "Watkins," replied the king, "is my name." "Papa, if I am not mistaken, of the beautiful Princess Alicia," said the old lady. "And of 18 other darlings," replied the king. "Listen, you're going to the office," said the old lady. It instantly flashed upon the king that she must be a fairy, or how could she know that? "You're right," said the old lady, answering his thoughts. "I am the good fairy Grandmarina. Attend. When you return home to dinner, politely invite the Princess Alicia to have some of the salmon you bought just now. It may disagree with her," said the king. The old lady became so very angry at this absurd idea that the king was quite alarmed, and humbly begged her pardon. "We hear a great deal too much about this thing disagreeing, and that thing disagreeing," said the old lady with the greatest contempt it was possible to express. "Don't be greedy. I think you want it all yourself." The king hung his head under this reproof, and said he wouldn't talk about things disagreeing any more. "Be good then," said the fairy Grand Marina, "and don't, when the beautiful Princess Alicia consents to partake of the salmon, as I think she will, you will find she will leave a fishbone on her plate. Tell her to dry it, and to rub it, and to polish it till it shines like mother of pearl, and to take care of it as a present from me." "Is that all?" asked the king. "Don't be impatient, sir," returned the fairy Grand Marina, scolding him severely. "Don't catch people short before they have done speaking. Just the way with you grown-up persons, you are always doing it." The king again hung his head and said he wouldn't do so any more. "Be good then," said the fairy Grand Marina, "and don't. Tell the Princess Alicia with my love that the fishbone is a magic present which can only be used once, but that it will bring her that once whatever she wishes for, provided she wishes for it at the right time. That is the message. Take care of it." The king was beginning, "Might I ask the reason?" when the fairy became absolutely furious. "Will you be good, sir?" she exclaimed, stamping her foot on the ground. "The reason for this and the reason for that, indeed! You are always wanting the reason. No reason! There, hooty tooty me! I am sick of your grown-up reasons." The king was extremely frightened by the old lady's flying into such a passion, and said he was very sorry to have offended her, and he wouldn't ask for reasons any more. "Be good then," said the old lady, "and don't." With those words Grand Marina vanished, and the king went on and on and on, till he came to the office. There he wrote and wrote and wrote, till it was time to go home again. Then he politely invited the Princess Alicia, as the fairy had directed him, to partake of the salmon, and when she had enjoyed it very much, he saw the fishbone on her plate, as the fairy had told him he would, and he delivered the fairy's message, and the Princess Alicia took care to dry the bone, and to rub it, and to polish it till it shone like mother of pearl. And so when the queen was going to get up in the morning, she said, "Oh, dear me, my head, my head," and then she fainted away. The Princess Alicia, who happened to be looking in at the chamber door, asking about breakfast, was very much alarmed when she saw her royal mamma in this state, and she rang the bell for Peggy, which was the name of the Lord Chamberlain. But remembering where the smelling bottle was, she climbed on a chair and got it, and after that she climbed on another chair by the bedside and held the smelling bottle to the queen's nose, and after that she jumped down and got some water, and after that she jumped up again and wetted the queen's forehead, and in short, when the Lord Chamberlain came in, that dear old woman said to the little princess, "What a trot you are! I couldn't have done it better myself." But that was not the worst of the good queen's illness. Oh no, she was very ill indeed for a long time. The Princess Alicia kept the 17 young princes and princesses quiet, and dressed and undressed, and danced the baby, and made the kettle boil, and heated the soup, and swept the hearth, and poured out the medicine, and nursed the queen, and did all that ever she could, and was as busy as busy could be. For there were not many servants at that palace, for 3 reasons: because the king was short of money, because the rise in his office never seemed to come, and because quarter day was so far off that it looked almost as far off and as little as one of the stars. But on the morning when the queen fainted away, where was the magic fishbone? Why, there it was in the Princess Alicia's pocket. She had almost taken it out to bring the queen to life again, when she put it back and looked for the smelling bottle. After the queen had come out of her swoon that morning and was dozing, the Princess Alicia hurried upstairs to tell a most peculiar secret to a most particularly confidential friend of hers, who was a duchess. People did suppose her to be a doll, but she was really a duchess, though nobody knew it except the princess. This most peculiar secret was a secret about the magic fishbone, the history of which was well known to the duchess, because the princess told her everything. The princess kneeled down by the bed on which the duchess was lying, full dressed and wide awake, and whispered the secret to her. The duchess smiled and nodded. People might have supposed that she never smiled and nodded, but she often did, though nobody knew it except the princess. Then the Princess Alicia hurried downstairs again to keep watch in the queen's room. She often kept watch by herself in the queen's room, but every evening While the illness lasted she sat there watching with the king, and every evening the king sat looking at her with a cross look, wondering why she never brought out the magic fishbone. As often as she noticed this, she ran upstairs, whispered the secret to the Duchess over again, and said to the Duchess besides, "They think we children never have a reason or a meaning," and the Duchess, though the most fashionable Duchess that ever was heard of, winked her eye. "Alicia," said the king, one evening when she wished him good night. "Yes, papa." "What is become of the magic fishbone?" "In my pocket, papa." "I thought you had lost it." "Oh, no, papa." "Or forgotten it." "No, indeed, papa." And so another time the dreadful little snapping pug dog next door made a rush at one of the young princes as he stood on the steps coming home from school, and terrified him out of his wits as he put his hand through a pane of glass and bled. When the 17 other young princes and princesses saw him bleed, they were terrified out of their wits too, and screamed themselves back to their 17 faces all at once. But the Princess Alicia put her hands over all their 17 mouths, one after another, and persuaded them to be quiet because of the sick queen. And then she put the wounded prince's hand in a basin of fresh cold water, while they stared with their twice 17 or 34 put down 4 and carry 3 eyes, and then she looked in the hand for bits of glass, and there were fortunately no bits of glass there. And then she said to 2 chubby-legged princes, who were sturdy though small, "Bring me in the royal rag bag. I must snip and stitch and cut and contrive." So those 2 young princes tugged at the royal rug bag and lugged it in, and the Princess Alicia sat down on the floor with a large pair of scissors and a needle and thread, and snipped and stitched and cut and contrived, and made a bandage and put it on, and it fitted beautifully. And so when it was all done she saw the king, her papa, looking on by the door. "Alicia." "Yes, papa." "What have you been doing?" "Snipping, stitching, cutting and contriving, papa." "Where is the magic fishbone?" "In my pocket, papa." "I thought you had lost it." "Oh, no, papa." "Or forgotten it." "No, indeed, papa." After that she ran upstairs to the Duchess and told her what had passed, and told her the secret over again, and the Duchess shook her flaxen curls and laughed with her rosy lips. Well, and so another time the baby fell under the grate. The 17 young princes and princesses were used to it, for they were almost always falling under the grate or down the stairs, but the baby was not used to it yet, and it gave him a swelled face and a black eye. The way the poor little darling came to tumble was, that he slid out of the Princess Alicia's lap, just as she was sitting in a great coarse apron that quite smothered her, in front of the kitchen fire, beginning to peel the turnips for the broth for dinner. And the way she came to be doing that was, that the king's cook had run away that morning with her own true love, who was a very tall but very tipsy soldier. Then the 17 young princes and princesses, who cried at everything that happened, cried and roared, but the Princess Alicia, who couldn't help crying a little herself, quietly called to them to be still, on account of not throwing back the queen upstairs, who was fast getting well, and said, "Hold your tongues, you wicked little monkeys, every one of you, while I examine baby." Then she examined baby and found that he hadn't broken anything, and she held cold iron to his poor dear eye, and smoothed his poor dear face, and he presently fell asleep in her arms. Then she said to the 17 princes and princesses, "I am afraid to lay him down yet, lest he should wake and feel pain. Be good, and you shall all be cooks." They jumped for joy when they heard that, and began making themselves cooks' caps out of old newspapers. So to one she gave the salt box, and to one she gave the barley, and to one she gave the herbs, and to one she gave the turnips, and to one she gave the carrots, and to one she gave the onions, and to one she gave the spice box, till they were all cooks, and all running about at work, she sitting in the middle, smothered in the great coarse apron, nursing baby. By and by the broth was done, and the baby woke up smiling like an angel, and was trusted to the sedatest princess to hold, while the other princes and princesses were squeezed off into a far-off corner to look at the Princess Alicia turning out the saucepan full of broth. for fear, as they were always getting into trouble, they should get splashed and scalded. When the broth came tumbling out, steaming beautifully and smelling like a nosegay good to eat, they clapped their hands. That made the baby clap his hands, and that, and his looking as if he had a comic toothache, made all the princes and princesses laugh. So the Princess Alicia said, "Laugh and be good, and for dinner we will make him a nest on the floor in a corner, and he shall sit in his nest and see a dance of 18 cooks." That delighted the young princes and princesses, and they ate up all the broth and washed up all the plates and dishes and cleared away, and pushed the table into a corner, and then they in their cook's caps, and the Princess Alicia in the smothering coarse apron that belonged to the cook that had run away with her own true love, that was the very tall but very tipsy soldier, danced a dance of 18 cooks before the angelic baby, who forgot his swelled face and his black eye, and crowed with joy. And so, once more the Princess Alicia saw King Watkins the First, her father, standing in the doorway looking on, and he said, "What have you been doing, Alicia? Cooking and contriving, papa." "What else have you been doing, Alicia? Keeping the children light-hearted, papa." "Where is the magic fishbone, Alicia?" "In my pocket, papa." "I thought you had lost it." "Oh no, papa, or forgotten it." "No, indeed, papa." The king then sighed so heavily, and seemed so low-spirited, and sat down so miserably, leaning his head upon his hand, and his elbow upon the kitchen table pushed away in the corner, that the 17 princes and princesses crept softly out of the kitchen, and left him alone with the Princess Alicia and the angelic baby. "What is the matter, papa? I am dreadfully poor, my child." "Have you no money at all, papa?" "None, my child." "Is there no way left of getting any, papa?" "No way," said the king. "I have tried very hard, and I have tried always." When she heard those last words, the Princess Alicia began to put her head into the pocket where she kept the magic fishbone. "Papa," said she, "when we have tried very hard and tried always, we must have done our very, very best." "No doubt, Alicia." "When we have done our very, very best, papa, and that is not enough, then I think the right time must have come for asking help of others." This was the very secret connected with the magic fishbone, which she had found out for herself from the good fairy Grandmarina's words, and which she had so often whispered to her beautiful and fashionable friend the Duchess. So she took out of her pocket the magic fishbone that had been dried and rubbed and polished till it shone like mother of pearl, and she gave it one little kiss and wished it was quarter day. And immediately it was quarter day, and the king's quarter's salary came rattling down the chimney and bouncing into the middle of the floor. But this was not half of what happened. No, not a quarter, for immediately afterwards the good fairy Grandmarina came riding in a carriage and 4 peacocks, with Mr. Pickle's boy up behind, dressed in silver and gold, with a cocked hat, powdered hair, pink silk stockings, a jewelled cane, and a nosegay. Down jumped Mr. Pickle's boy, with his cocked hat in his hand, and wonderfully polite, being entirely changed by enchantment, and handed Grandmarina out, and there she stood, in her rich shot silk, smelling of dried lavender, fanning herself with a sparkling fan. "Alicia, my dear," said this charming old fairy, "how do you do? I hope I see you pretty well. Give me a kiss." The Princess Alicia embraced her, and then Grandmarina turned to the king and said rather sharply, "Are you good?" The king said he hoped so. "I suppose you know the reason now why my goddaughter here kissed the princess again did not apply to the fishbone sooner," said the fairy. The king made her a shy bow. "Ah, but you didn't then," said the fairy. The king made her a shyer bow. "Any more reasons to ask for?" said the fairy. The king said no, and he was very sorry. "Be good then," said the fairy, "and live happy ever afterwards." Then Grandmarina waved her fan, and the queen came in most splendidly dressed, and the 17 young princes and princesses, no longer grown out of their clothes, came in newly fitted out from top to toe, with tucks in everything to admit of its being let out. After that the fairy tapped the Princess Alicia with her fan, and the smothering coarse apron flew away, and she appeared exquisitely dressed, like a little birdie, with a wreath of orange flowers and a silver veil. After that the kitchen dresser changed of itself into a wardrobe, made of beautiful woods and gold and looking glass, which was full of dresses of all sorts, all for her and all exactly fitting her. After that the angelic baby came in, running alone, with his face and eye not a bit worse but much the better. Then Grammarina begged to be introduced to the Duchess, and when the Duchess was brought down many compliments passed between them. A little whispering took place between the fairy and the Duchess, and then the fairy said out loud, "Yes, I thought she would have told you." Grammarina then turned to the king and queen and said, "We are going in search of Prince Certain Personio. The pleasure of your company is requested at church in half an hour precisely." So she and the Princess Alicia got into the carriage, and Mr. Pickle's boy handed in the Duchess, who sat by herself on the opposite seat, and then Mr. Pickle's boy put up the steps and got up behind, and the peacocks flew away with their tails spread. Prince Certain Personio was sitting by himself, eating barley sugar and waiting to be 90. When he saw the peacocks, followed by the carriages, coming in at the window, it immediately occurred to him that something uncommon was going to happen. "Prince," said Grammarina, "I bring you your bride." The moment the fairy said those words, Prince Certain Personio's face left off being sticky, and his jacket and corduroys changed to peach bloom velvet, and his hair curled, and a cap and feather flew in like a bird and settled on his head. He got into the carriage by the fairy's invitation, and there he renewed his acquaintance with the Duchess, whom he had seen before. In the church were the Prince's relations and friends, and the Princess Alicia's relations and friends, and the 17 princes and princesses, and the baby, and a crowd of the neighbours. The marriage was beautiful beyond expression. The Duchess was bridesmaid, and beheld the ceremony from the pulpit, where she was supported by the cushion of the desk. Granmarina gave a magnificent wedding feast afterwards, in which there was everything and more to eat and everything and more to drink. The wedding cake was delicately ornamented with white satin robins, fostered silver and white lilies, and was 42 yards round. When Granmarina had drunk her love to the young couple, and Prince Certain Personio had made a speech, and everybody had cried hip 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 hurrah, Grandmarina announced to the king and queen that in future there would be 8 quarter days in every year except a leap year, when there would be 10. She then turned to Certain Personio and Alicia and said, "My dears, you will have 35 children, and they will all be good and beautiful. 17 of your children will be boys, and 18 will be girls. The hair of the whole of your children will curl naturally. They will never have the measles, and will have recovered from the whooping cough before being born." On hearing such good news, everybody cried out hip 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 hurrah again. "It only remains," said Granmarina in conclusion, "to make an end of the fishbone." So she took it from the hand of the Princess Alicia, and it instantly flew down the throat of the dreadful little snapping pug dog next door and choked him, and he expired in convulsions. The end. End of The Magic Fishbone, a holiday romance, from the pen of Miss Alice Rainbird, aged 7, by Charles Dickens. The Poor Devil by Unknown. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Read by Chad Horner. Once upon a time there was a peasant who led his cow to pasture in the spring and prayed God to have her in his care. The evil one was sitting in a bush, heard him, and said to himself, "When things turn out well, they thank God for it, but if anything goes wrong, then I am always to blame." A few days later the cow strayed into a swamp, and when the peasant came and saw her, he said, "Look at that, the devil has had his finger in the pie again." "Just what I might have expected," thought the devil in his bush. Then the peasant went off to fetch people to help drag the cow out, but in the meantime the devil slipped from his bush and helped out the cow, for he thought, "Now he will have something to thank me for too." But when the peasant came back and saw the cow on dry land, he said, "Thank God, she's out again." End of The Poor Devil by Unknown. This Little Pig Went to Market by an unknown author. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. read by Chad Horner. This little pig went to market. This little pig stayed at home. This little pig had roast beef. This little pig had none. This little pig cried wee wee all the way home. End of This Little Pig Went to Market by an unknown author. The Three Bears by an unknown author. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. The Three Bears by an unknown author, read by Chad Horner. The Story of the Three Bears. There were once three bears who lived in a wood. Their porridge was thick, and their chairs and beds good. The biggest bear, Bruin, was Shirley. His wife, Mrs. Bruin, was called Mammy Muff. Their son, Tiny Cub, was like Dame Goose's lad. He was not very good, nor yet very bad. Now Bruin, the biggest, the Shirley old bear, had a great granite bowl and a cast iron chair. Mammy Muff's bowl and chair you would no doubt prefer. They were both made of brickbats, but both suited her. Young Tiny Cub's bowl, chair, and bed were the best. This big bears and baby bears freely confessed. Mr. B, with his wife and his son, went one day to take a short stroll and a visit to pay. He left the door open, for, said he, no doubt, if our friend should call in, he will find us all out. It was only 2 miles from dark hazelnut wood, in which the great house of the three Bruins stood, that there lived a young miss, daring, funny, and fair, and from having bright curls, she was called Golden Hair. She had roamed through the wood to see what she could see, and she saw, going walking, the Bruins all three. She said to herself, to rob bears is no sin. The three bears have gone out, so I think I'll go in. She entered their parlour, and she saw a great bowl, and in it a spoon like a hair cutter's pole. That porridge, said she, may stay long enough there. It tastes like the food of the Shirley old bear. She tried Mammy Muff's, and she said, Mrs. B, I think your taste and my taste will never agree. Then she tried Tiny Cub's bowl and said, this is nice. I will put in some salt, and of bread a thick slice. The porridge she ate soon made her so great, the chair that she sat on broke down with her weight. The bottom fell out, and she cried in dismay, this is Tiny Cub's chair, and oh, what will he say? His papa is, I know, the most savage of bears. His mamma is a fury, but for her who cares? I'm sure I do not. And then, as for her son, that young bear, Tiny Cub, from him shall I run? No, not I, indeed, but I will not sit here. I shall next break the floor through, that's what I most fear. So upstairs she ran, and there 3 beds she found. She looked under each one, and she looked all around, but no one she saw. So she got into bed. It was surely old Bruin's, and well stuffed with lead. Mammy Muff's next she tried. It was stuffed with round stones. So she got into Tiny Cub's, and rested her bones. Golden Hair was asleep when the 3 bears came in. Said big Bruin, I'm hungry to eat, let's begin. Who has been to my porridge? He roared with such might, his voice was like wind down the chimney at night. Who has been to my porridge? Growled out Mrs. B. Her voice was like cats fighting up in a tree. Who has been to my porridge and eaten it all? Young Tiny Cub said, in a voice very small. Who has been sitting in my great armchair? In voice like a thunderstorm, roared the great bear. Who has been sitting in my good armchair? Growled out Mammy Muff, like a soul in despair. Who has sat in my nice chair and broken it down? Young Tiny Cub said, and so fierce was his frown that his mother with pride to his father said, there, see our pet Tiny Cub can look just like a bear. So roaring and growling and frowning, the bears, one after the other, came running upstairs. Who has been upon my bed? Old Bruin roared out, in a voice just like rain down a large water spout. Who has been upon my bed? Growled out Mammy Muff, in a voice like her husband's, but not quite so rough. Who is lying on my bed? Said young Tiny Cub, in a voice like hot water poured into a tub. and Tiny Cub's breath was so hot as he spoke that Golden Hair dreamt of hot water and woke. She opened her eyes and she saw the three bears, and said, "Let me go, please, I'll soon run downstairs." But Big Bruin was angry and shouted out, "No, you had no right to come hither, and now you shan't go. What we mean to do with you ere long you shall find. You can lie there and cry till I make up my mind." To Mummy and Tiny then did Big Bruin roar, "Go and block up the chimney and nail up the door. This Golden Hair now has got into a scrape, and if I can help it, she shall not escape." But Golden Hair saw that a window was there. It was always kept open to let in fresh air. So she jumped out of bed, to the window she ran, saying, "Three bears, goodbye, catch me now if you can." To the window the bears ran as fast as they could, but Golden Hair flew like the wind through the wood. She said the bear's breath had filled her with steam, but when she grew older she said 'twas a dream. And no doubt she was right to take such a view. Still some part of the story is certainly true, for unto this day there is no one who dares to say that there never existed three bears. End of The Three Bears by an unknown author. The Story of the Three Little Pigs by an unknown author. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Read by Chad Horner. The Story of the Three Little Pigs by an unknown author. Once upon a time there was an old sow with three little pigs, and as she had not enough to keep them, she sent them out to seek their fortune. The first that went off met a man with a bundle of straw, and said to him, "Please, man, give me that straw to build me a house," which the man did, and the little pig built a house with it. Presently came along a wolf, and knocked at the door, and said, little pig, let me come in." To which the pig answered, "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," said the wolf. So he huffed and he puffed, and he blew his house in, and ate up the little pig. The second pig met a man with a bundle of furs, and said, "Please, man, give me that furs to build a house," which the man did, and the pig built his house. Then along came the wolf and said, little pig, let me come in." "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed, and at last he blew the house down and ate up the second little pig. The third little pig met a man with a load of bricks, and said, "Please, man, give me those bricks to build a house with." So the man gave him the bricks, and he built his house with them. So the wolf came, as he did to the other little pigs, and said, little pig, let me come in." "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." Well, he huffed and he puffed and he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed, but he could not get the house down. When he found that he could not, with all his huffing and puffing, blow the house down, he said, "Little pig, I know where there is a nice field of turnips." "Where?" said the little pig. "Oh, in Mr. Smith's home field, and if you will be ready tomorrow morning, I will call for you, and we will go together and get some for dinner." "Very well," said the little pig, "I will be ready. What time do you mean to go?" "Oh, at 6 o'clock." Well, the little pig got up at 5 and got the turnips, and was home again before 6. When the wolf came, he said, "Little pig, are you ready?" "Ready," said the little pig. "I have been and come back again, and got a nice pot full for dinner." The wolf felt very angry at this, but thought that he would be up to the little pig somehow or other. So he said, "Little pig, I know where there is a nice apple tree." "Where?" said the pig. "Down at Merry Garden," replied the wolf, "and if you will not deceive me, I will come for you at 5 o'clock tomorrow, and we will go together and get some apples." Well, the little pig woke up 4 the next morning, and bustled up and went off for the apples, hoping to get back before the wolf came. But he had farther to go, and had to climb the tree, so that just as he was coming down from it, he saw the wolf coming. which, as you may suppose, frightened him very much. When the wolf came up, he said, "Little pig, what? Are you here before me? Are they nice apples?" "Yes, very," said the little pig. "I will throw you down one." And he threw it so far that while the wolf was going to pick it up, the little pig jumped down and ran home. The next day the wolf came again and said to the little pig, "Little pig, there is a fair in the town this afternoon. Will you go?" "Oh, yes," said the pig, "I will go. What time shall you be ready?" "At 3," said the wolf. So the little pig went off before the time as usual, and got to the fair and bought a butter churn, and was on his way home with it when he saw the wolf coming. Then he could not tell what to do, so he got into the churn to hide, and in doing so turned it round, and it began to roll, and rolled down the hill with the pig inside it, which frightened the wolf so much that he ran home without going to the fair. He went to the little pig's house, and told him how frightened he had been by a great round thing which came down the hill past him. Then the little pig said, "Ha! I frightened you, did I? I had been to the fair and bought a butter churn, and when I saw you I got into it and rolled down the hill." Then the wolf was very angry indeed, and declared he would eat up the little pig, and that he would get down the chimney after him. Now, when the little pig saw what he was about, he hung on the pot full of water and made up a blazing fire, and, just as the wolf was coming down, took off the cover of the pot, and in fell the wolf. And the little pig put on the cover again in an instant, boiled him up, and ate him for supper, and lived happy ever after. End of the story of the 3 little pigs by an unknown author.